This is always the song and dance moment where it takes a second to get us live. We are almost there. And if we are live, hello and happy Wednesday, everyone, to our listeners. It looks like we are now officially live on all the different platforms. All right. Well, happy Wildfire Wednesday, everyone. Excited to have our second annual here. And in 2 weeks, we'll be in FRI. And joined by our lead host here, Eric Litzenberg. And we're going to have everyone do a quick introduction. But if you are listening on any of the platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, fire up the chat in the channels. This is for you to ask questions. This is for you to extract knowledge. And so be selfish, ask questions. I will be monitoring those chats and feeding them in here. So we would love to hear from you and continue to have this be as much of a two-way dialogue between the listeners and everyone on the show here. So I'll pass it to Eric and we'll get intros going and we'll dive into the topic today.
Nice. Thanks, Kevin. I also appreciate everybody who's on for the second time. This is pretty cool to get this going, and I'm sure we're going to watch our viewership grow. I'm Eric Litzenberg. I came from Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I was in local fire response and preparedness and all the things we're going to talk about today. I'm now the Senior Wildland Fire Advisor for IAFC. So I'm going to give a little bit more of than a short intro just to frame this issue, and then we'll actually get into the meat and potatoes, which is our three guests, the people we actually want to hear from. But as a reminder, 2 weeks ago, the last time we did this, we had a few guests who were talking about the wildland issue from national and regional perspectives. And they, and I think all of us who are probably listening, can agree that there are things that we need to be concerned about. And anecdotally, we see an increase in wildland fires and wildland-urban interface fires. We all have stories about probably bad outcomes. And if you don't have a direct story, you've definitely seen something on the news with LA fires and Maui Lahaina fires, stuff that's happening in the East and New York and New Jersey recently. We're seeing an uptick in fires nationally, including the burning down of a historic lodge at the Grand Canyon. So we all see things that are happening in the wildland space. That's what we talked about last week. Last week we also talked briefly about statistics, and what do the statistics say? They say things are getting worse. They say we're seeing more fires. Year to date, we're up to 39,000, which is up 2,000 from last time we talked. Year to date, we are up over 500,000 from where we were a couple weeks ago to 3 million acres. So we're slightly less than the 10-year average, but things are happening. And there's 35 fires that are classified as large that are being managed by large incident management teams across the nation. So a lot is going on. Also, last week, we talked about different facets of the wildland and wildland urban interface problem. We talked about the cohesive strategy, which is comprised of three tenets: safe and effective response, landscape scale management or forest health and resilience things, and building fire adaptive communities. So that's sort of a reminder. There was a lot of talk about CRR, community risk reduction, and mitigation. And so with that, we invited these three on to talk to us because it was a big topic last year. We didn't, or last time, 2 weeks ago. We really didn't dig into it much because we had an hour, but we're going to dig into it today with these three. So there's the introduction to the show. Let's hear who these three folks are. Ashley, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and give us a brief intro?
Awesome. Thanks, Eric and Kevin. Happy to be here. So, Ashley Whitworth, I am from Colorado. I grew up in Littleton, but I have lived down in Colorado Springs for just over 14 years. I have worked in the wildfire mitigation section for the Colorado Springs Fire Department for those 14 years. I am currently the wildfire mitigation program administrator for the section down here. And so I basically run everything, all wildfire mitigation stuff related for the city. So we have our chipping program, we run contract project work, we have our stipend programs, and things like that. So I manage that for everything here at CSFD.
Nice. And Ashley, you also do work on behalf of local government in the National Wildfire Coordinating Group, NWCG, the WUI Mitigation Committee. Tell us just really briefly, what is that?
Yeah, so on that committee, we are looking at at, I mean, most recently we have been looking at how do we have, working with you, Eric, on some, training gaps. How do we get some position descriptions updated? How do we kind of have like a unified message across, all these jurisdictions, Forest Service and things like that. So we've been plugging away, at some of that and working on that to try to get all of that updated for everybody.
Right, maybe trying to get us all speaking on the same language nationally on
Yes.
what mitigation means, right? Yeah, not an easy task. Thanks, Ashley. Glad to have you here. Porfirio Chavarria, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. My name is Porfirio Chavarria. I work for the City of Santa Fe Fire Department. Kind of here in my personal capacity today, helping you out there, Eric, and IAFC to talk about wildfire mitigation. I've been doing wildland-urban interface mitigation for the last 20 years for the fire department and been involved in wildland fire for, gosh, since 1998.
And Porf, why do you know 1998 so well? It seems like you're like, what brought you into it?
Yeah, and nothing in particular. I mean, so I'm from Santa Clara Pueblo, which is just about 30 miles north of Santa Fe, and that's the year that they had the Oso fire burned on the north end of Santa Clara Pueblo's reservation there, and they own about 50,000 acres. About 20,000 of that is forested, and it burned like 4 or 5 thousand acres on the north end of that fire from the Oso fire. 2 years later, we had the Cerro Grande fire that burned about 8,000 acres on the south end of the fire. And then a decade after that, in 2011, we had the Las Conchas fire that burned probably twice that, another 10,000 acres through the middle of the Santa Clara watershed. And so it's definitely been a journey and an impact, where I felt it right at home.
Yeah, sort of the broader view of mitigation and community risk reduction. Y'all have had some pretty serious forest impacts that have affected Santa Clara, but glad to have you on too, man. Thanks to have you here. And last, certainly not least by any means, Justice Jones.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Really excited to be a part of the panel discussion with my friends Ashley and Porfirio. I really got my start in wildland fire after a short stint in the military in the Smoky Bear Ranger District in New Mexico. And from there, I took over statewide wildland fire prevention and urban interface efforts for the state of Texas for the better part of a decade. Most recently, I led the Austin Fire Department's Wildfire Division, where we worked to implement the National Cohesive Wildfire Strategy at the local level, including adoption of the ICC Wildland-Urban Interface Code with some amendments to align with current best practices. Currently, I serve as the Fire and Disaster Mitigation Program Manager for the International Code Council, where I'm assisting communities across the globe in adopting the Wildland Urban Interface Code and enhancing their community resiliency to wildfire. In addition to that, I've been a long-term member of the International Association of Fire Chiefs Wildland Fire Policy Committee, and along with Porfirio and Ashley, serve on the Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network and other groups to help support peer-to-peer learning from those who've been in wildland fire for a long time and those who are emerging into this field, which we need all the hands we can get on deck. So really excited to be here today.
We got three of you who are widely considered, I know considered by me, and Kevin's going to laugh at me because how many times I don't unmute myself. So sorry for that. We've got three people who I know I consider experts in the field of mitigation. I think the broad fire world does as well, but I don't know that everybody really understands what that means. And there's a lot of places that, don't have experts like you. So I'm going to throw a general just topic out there. Y'all can fight over who answers and when, but like broadly, what is community risk reduction and mitigation? What are they and how do they fit into the wildland space as a whole?
I'll start out, Eric. I think community risk reduction means a lot of things in different communities, but in relation to wildland fire, really means embracing the entire community as part of the solution to address wildland urban interface problems. It's not an issue that one entity or organization can solve, certainly not an issue the fire service can solve on their own. So to me, it really means engaging all of your partners and your cooperators, as well as community members, in developing solutions and strategies to confront the threat of wildfire, using all the tools that you have available, from education, outreach, enforcement, and engineering.
And maybe to add to that, Justice, the big thing that I found has been really successful is building those relationships, finding those, whether they're partners, but even the residents that I serve, talking with them. Lots of times I'll go out to the same property 4 or 5 times over the course of 6 or 7 years. And then there's some communities that I've known for a decade now that every year they're giving me a call to go out and, I don't know, follow up on something, or just to ask simple questions, and being available for that has been, I think it's been really impactful and supportive of what we're trying to do. And when we have proposals up or things that we're working on, it seems like they're available to talk to the mayor or to whomever, community leaders that can really move the needle on some of this work.
Yeah, I would
Ashley?
add, yep, I would add to just going off of what these two said. I think Justice, you said this isn't necessarily a fire department problem. Um, Same thing here for the Springs is we really have to rely on our community. And so, we work with 143 neighborhoods. They help get our message out. They help, educate the people in their community too. But just to kind of take a step back with like the community risk reduction is, like Justice said, it's going to be different for every community. But you have to be able to kind of unpack that a little bit more. And I think the biggest thing is you have to engage your community so they know what you're trying to do. Um, we have here we have a community education and outreach section, and they do the education on some of like our aging population or things like that, where I'm strictly the mitigation. But the biggest thing is involving the community, because we have to get their buy-in to be able to move that needle forward. If we're not including them in what we're doing, then they don't know what's going on. They don't know what we're trying to do when we're trying to reduce the risk to help them. Our tagline here for our program is sharing the responsibility. Again, right? We can't do it ourselves as the fire department. We have to rely on those relationships to make this all come together and work.
So all three of you referenced partnerships and engagement. I want to come back to that. But everybody also mentioned it. Like you're talking to people about doing something. What are you talking to them about? What are they doing? What are the things that we're finding to be successful in reducing risk?
Oh man. Well, I think Fire Adaptive Community Learning Network has that nice wheel that kind of categorizes all the things. Specifically, what I'm working on and what I'm most excited about here, it's right at the peak of the horizon that we're working on, is a wildland urban interface code. And I think codes and regulations are a way to be more of that maybe stick and maybe less of a carrot, kind of to get people to do things. But it's also a way to show broader audiences that Santa Fe is doing something about wildland fire that's been proven to work, on showing that these codes that assist people to mitigate the work reduces fires. And then the ultimate goal, I think, for at least one part of the goal that I'm working on for these codes is to ensure that there's insurability, that people still have access to insurance. And when insurance companies view a city that doesn't have regulations that dictate some of these things, then they tend to increase the risk of they feel like they're at more risk if a community is impacted from a wildfire. But that's what I'm excited about. And I'm hoping to work with Justice and reaching out to other people around on how to shape that and how best to do that, because other communities have done it. We haven't. we're just beginning our journey there.
Yeah, maybe Ashley and Justice, you too. What in Austin and Colorado Springs, what are you doing? What is effectively reducing risk for these folks, in addition to what Porpoise do?
Yeah, so here in the Springs, I will speak to a few things. So, like I mentioned earlier, we have our neighborhood shipping program. So we offer free on-site consultations where we will go out, actually meet with a homeowner or a community, walk their property with them, and give them kind of a plan on what they need to do to reduce their risk and make defensible space on their property. If they do that work themselves, then they can stack it curbside. And then we have chipping crews that work seasonally from about May to November. And then our crews will actually come through and chip that material and haul it away free of charge for the homeowner. So the biggest thing here for us is, not everybody has vehicles or trailers where, they can take the slash and, get rid of it. So that helps there. We also have grant funding. So let's say we do meet with a homeowner and it's just beyond their capabilities to cut down a tree or do the mitigation work. We can help offset that cost if they hire a licensed tree service to come in and do the work for them. Typically, it's a dollar for dollar match up to $500. So another good incentive, right? Because mitigation work is pretty pricey, especially here in Colorado. So that helps offset that cost of funds. The insurance piece too, something really big we're dealing with here in Colorado is we have the state resiliency code that's coming down. And so we're trying to figure out how do we implement that into our codes and ordinances that we already have here in Colorado Springs. And then just one other thing too I want to touch on is it's been probably 3 years in the making, but we just signed an agreement with the United States Forest Service. And so us as CSFD, as a local government, we're actually going to be able to do mitigation work on federal property. And so we're going to have our first mitigation project. It's going to be about 200 acres, and that's going to be starting here in August. I say we are doing quite a bit. Again, I say it's us, but it's really the residents that are reducing the risk on somewhat of the smaller scale in their communities. And then we are going out and doing those large acreage mitigation projects to reduce the risk as well.
And Ashley, is most of the work that you and Colorado Springs are doing, is it fuel management or defensible space stuff?
Yeah, so it's to our large project work is, hazardous fuels reduction on, like I said, we're doing anything from 20 acres to 200 to 400 acres right now.
Two quick follow-up questions, and then Justice, I'd love to hear your input on what CRR and mitigation mean in Austin or from your view. But the first follow-up question is that the U.S. Forest Service agreement, is that because that piece of property is, you guys were able to prove that it is risky to somebody?
Yeah, so I mean, we all know what's going on with the federal government, but the Forest Service got grant funding and just how they work, with their procurement process. It's a little bit easier for them to funnel the money over to us and we can run everything through our procurement office. But yes, the biggest thing was it's our southwest part of town. So kind of down by Old Stage and Gold Camp, if anybody knows where that is. No mitigation work has been done down there. That's a one way in and one way out for some homeowners that are up there, or if we have people that are, up there visiting and things like that. So that's really why we wanted to try to target that and work with the Forest Service to get that participating agreement in place. And then that opens the door for us to do, future work in other places as well with the Forest Service.
Nice. The follow-up question number two I had is, is your workforce a response workforce as well? Or are they foresters, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, so we have honestly, Corey, who manages our projects, is kind of I would say our forester. And then everybody else just has somewhat of a background, in mitigation. A lot of what we've done is just I say learning here from on the job. What we will do too sometimes, when we had Waldo Canyon and Black Forest right here in our backyard, we're all 130, 190 red carded to help with wildland firefighting. We don't get to go out on a lot of deployments just because we have so much work here to do. So, if I'm taking a crew out of service here, then I don't have anybody to do the neighborhood chipping program and chip all of the material. We have been lucky enough this year to actually just go right up the pass and help the Forest Service with some prescribed burning that they have been doing. So that's been good training for us as
Yeah.
well.
Nice. So we have a couple questions coming in. I will get to those in a second, but Justice, you've just heard Porf and Ashley give their 2 cents on what it is. What are we doing in communities that's reducing risk, man?
Yeah, some amazing work going on in both of those communities. I would say we could add a third R to community risk reduction, and that's relationships. And in Austin, we really started with building relationships. The first thing we did before we started any mitigation projects was establish a wildfire coalition that consisted of partners from across the city and county, utilities, natural resource managers, building professionals, and we all got together and developed a community wildfire protection plan based on the National Cohesive Wildfire Strategy that created a common operating picture that we could all agree moving forward on what needed to be done and what our particular roles in implementing that plan were. In addition, we noticed that we had communities that were eager to do work to protect themselves and their neighbors. And so we used programs like the Firewise Community Sites program to help support our communities in developing local level community wildfire protection plans. And we didn't want them to come up in a silo, so we formed an alliance called the Austin Firewise Alliance of all the existing Firewise communities. They came together, they helped each other learn and grow. They did risk assessments on each other's property and created a multiplier effect for the fire department capacity because when 60% of your town of a population of almost 1 million is at risk, you're never going to have enough fire personnel to do all the work that needs to be done on the ground. And so really leveraging those grassroots efforts in the community level to enhance capacity was really essential for the success of Austin and their continued success. And in addition to that, working with communities across the country and expanding into international audiences to take those same principles of relationship building first. What you see in Colorado Springs and Santa Fe is they built a platform of buy-in in their community level by all the years of hard work and investment they did in their community. And Austin absolutely would not have been successful in adopting the wildland-urban interface code, and especially in a property rights driven state, if we didn't have that community buy-in, people showing up voluntarily at city council member meetings saying we need this code to protect us and protect our neighbors. And so it's really the relationships that are critical to any successful community risk reduction effort.
Nice. You're really getting into some answers here, Justice, to questions that are being asked. But I'm going to ask them anyway, see if people have additional input. So there's two that are sort of related here. One question is about how do you get people to adapt to CRR practices? And I think you're saying part of this is engagement, a lot of this is relationships, and it sounds like part of the answer is consistency and length of relationship. Just keep at it, right? But more specifically, there's this question or a statement, I guess, that's like, what kind of success stories do you have? Can you give an example of how you've successfully integrated CRR practices into the community? Any of you have success stories?
Yeah, I
I can
mean,
give you one, by the way. Porf, I'm gonna come on to your ambassador program in a second, but Porf, you were about to speak. Go ahead.
um, gosh, no, our ambassador program is amazing, where we're grabbing, those neighborhood leaders, those residents that are living in the communities out, giving them the information on what wildfire mitigation looks like, what good mitigation looks like, what a wildfire is and how it behaves, and giving them that education so they can share that with their communities. Justice was talking about that force multiplier effect. That's really powerful to have that strong ambassador program, and it is built on those relationships and having them, being um, someone that they can trust, that your ambassadors can trust, and can give you a call and talk for an hour. And maybe it's about some issue they're dealing with, or how to assist them with whatever challenges they're facing. And sometimes it's just being there. It doesn't even necessarily mean that you're help. It doesn't seem like there's a direct connection to that help, but you're just there. The success I was thinking of before you brought me to the ambassadors, which has been really powerful, is it is part of those partnerships. What we've done in Santa Fe is build from a loose knit wildland team that was all structure firefighters that was on that end, and then created a whole mitigation program that was kind of based on that brought it more into full-time firefighters that were just doing mitigation work. For quite a while, that's all we were doing was those fuels management projects, going out and doing home hazard assessments, doing working with the communities to do defensible space projects, not only on individual properties, but looking at that neighborhood scale level and finding out where we can make those inroads to support those neighborhoods in getting that work done. And maybe that's having the expertise to go out there and mark all the trees that need to be removed. Maybe it's just providing, seed money for a chipper, creating avenues or opportunities for a pickup program, like a lot like what Ashley was talking about. People would put slash on the curb and we'd go and pick it up, because lots of people just don't have that capacity to take it to the local, transfer station or wherever it needs to go. And so it's finding those opportunities. And I think, you bring up that ambassador program. That's a real key thing. Maybe I did a lot of that without calling people ambassadors, but it's finding those neighborhood leaders and empowering them and discovering solutions. One of the ambassadors always tells me it's finding the imagination. Where's the imagination? How do we solve the problem that we have in front of us through imagination? Because the normal processes may not work or there's hindrances, how do we find the solutions? Because there's always a way.
Yeah, that's nice. And now I'm going to give my anecdote because I don't think Porf gives his ambassador program enough credit. When I left the city of Santa Fe Fire Department, when I retired from local government, I moved from the city out into the county. And one of the very first days that I was in my community, I was going to pick up my mailbox, and an older woman, my guess is she's 75 years old. I live in a pretty good urban interface area. She was at the mailbox. She asked me if I was new to the neighborhood, and I said I am. And then she lectured me for about 15 minutes on how to keep my community safe, on how to build a defensible space, on when they were doing chipper days. It was amazing. And I didn't once tell her, that I just left local government fire response. I learned a crap load from this woman. That was super effective. And some of these questions about like how do you overcome challenges, you find people who know how to speak to their constituents. And sometimes it's elected officials, and sometimes it's an ambassador who's a 75-year-old woman who cares about her community more than anybody else. And you give her, a couple hours of education, and man, she's going to help you conquer some of these barriers. Anyway, it's a cool program, Porf. You should be
Yeah,
proud.
no, I appreciate it. And those folks, I mean, she has a lot of knowledge background, and all she needed from me was more just support to know that, oh, hey, the fire department will support her if she needs help with, finding funding or solving problems through the solutions. But a lot of the fire background and ecology and trying to motivate people, she kind of already had that. It was just knowing somebody else was there to understand that, I think.
Yeah. Ashley, Justice, do you guys have examples on how to sort of overcome those barriers and getting people to actually listen to what you're trying to get them to do?
Yeah, I think like Porfirio, building a mob mentality in a positive way that neighbors can look over the fence and see that something's happening and ask questions and be able to be informed peer to peer. I think that's a really powerful model and say good defensible spaces and make good neighbors. And so that peer to peer learning is really powerful, but also organizations and jurisdictions have to demonstrate that they're taking this issue serious by doing the work that they can to support their communities and let everybody know that this is a serious issue that takes everybody to confront. So I think that's a really important model. And then using the avenues that you have to educate people, local media, social media, community newsletters, and as often as many times as you can to reach that saturation, because a lot of our populations are uh, change on a frequent basis. So this isn't something you can do once, it's an ongoing effort. And it creates that chain of awareness and communication when people are empowered to talk to their neighbors. And one of the things I think is beneficial about the crisis we're facing with wildfire is it's bringing communities together for the first time in a long time. I think they have a reason to care about each other and work together and know that they're in this together. And I think that's something that's been missing from our country, is something that unites us and brings us together. And so wildfire can be a major uniting factor in communities. And we've all seen that happen, that people are helping people.
True. True that. Ashley, any good examples?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of hit on it. We have our, like I said, our neighborhood champions here, which is, kind of the ambassador program. But, we have a lot of them that have worked with us, for our program's been around for 25 years. And they, like you said, Eric, we have those people. When you move in, they hand you a booklet, they give you the lecture, you need to know where you're moving. We have a lot of people that move here that don't understand they're moving into a wildland urban interface. And so to kind of get it from a community member telling them as a neighbor, hey, you need to do this, call the fire department, and us coming out too and giving them that education. Again, right, they're getting it from two sides, which I think helps. For us here, education is a big thing. I think, we have, again, a lot of turnover just with the military installations that we have around here. And so we constantly get new people that come in and they just don't understand our codes, our ordinances, or, well, I live in the WUI. What does that mean? So, for us, it's a lot of education. And you talked about successes. I think, one that I want to hit on besides Waldo Canyon is in 2021, we had done a mitigation project with our forestry department in Bear Creek open space on the west side of town. And somebody went in there and started a fire. And luckily, it was in the area where we had done mitigation work. It was about, I think, a 20-acre fire, but we did mitigation work, I say, on our side of the fence. The homeowners along that open space had all done mitigation work as well. I will say if they had not done mitigation work, it probably would have been a completely different story for us. We probably would have had multiple homes lost in that fire. And, you talk about, people saying, hey, we're doing this as community members, but what are our city officials doing? So I think it's good to just for us, big success on that of, hey, we've done mitigation work. This is why you need to continue to do mitigation work. We get a lot of questions here of, well, does mitigation work really do anything for us? Does it help? Yes, in Waldo Canyon, we saw it because it saved the Cedar Heights community. And then in the Bear Creek fire, like I said, it saved the multiple homes as well.
Yeah, I think we do have at this point lots of great examples of success. It's cool when you have somebody who's seen it firsthand, actually, like you just described. Um, you see those examples. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's proving to be successful. I'm thinking back, and because I know a little bit more about the scope of Porfirio's work, and we're Santa Fe maybe a bit of a smaller community than either Austin or Sea Springs. I think about some of us are resource strapped, like trying to figure out how to tell stories. I think if you think of Chief Brian Schaefer, he had a production shop in his department where they could produce videos to show their community members. And I don't know, Justice, if you had that in Austin or if you had Ashley in Sea Springs, but there are great videos. I think of IBHS, the Wildfire Prepared Home. I mean, they just did a brand new one, 7 minutes or something you can watch and share it with your homeowners, share it with your business owners, saying, here's, this stuff makes a difference. It's not just Ashley's example. Like these things work scientifically. Here's what you do. And I think of Justice, the work you do with ICC, and kudos to you for going there and to ICC for letting you join us. Where do codes fit into all of this? Like, where's the sexiness of codes?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I want to go back just a little bit and speak to one thing, and I'll tie it back into codes. And this is something I learned from Colorado Springs and Santa Fe in regards to the recognition of the issue is if you don't have a common operating picture of risk, i.e., if you haven't mapped your wildfire risk and the potential vulnerabilities, it's not going to be as real to folks. So Colorado Springs was one of the early adopters that developed a risk map, and they put that out to the public. And I know Porfirio was in Santa Fe was the first city in the country that developed a wildfire vulnerability map to look at what populations not only could be impacted by wildfire, but maybe not as resilient once they are impacted. And so being able to demonstrate that risk is really important. And that's equally as important when it comes to code adoption. The nexus for me is the understanding that if we start building communities not to burn, then all the other things we need to do to solve wildland fire, like more prescribed burning or the ability to manage wildland fires that naturally occur, or the ability to have safe infrastructure, then all of those solutions are going to become easier and easier. And I hope for a day where we have entire communities and subdivisions that are intentionally built that we can put prescribed fire on the ground right up next to without a concern from us and from the communities. And so my long-term strategy and nexus for the International Code Council and the Wildland-Urban Interface Code is to create a built environment that allows us as wildland fire practitioners to do the other things we need to do much more safely and effectively, which much more buy-in from the public. And so really form that nexus in my mind that everybody would benefit from us having a more resilient built environment, whether you're a natural resource manager, whether you're a planner or a first responder. The long-term solution lies in those resilient communities and structures.
One piece of the puzzle. That's sort of the answer to that. Question came in that you just triggered me to ask, Justice. And that is, how can emergency response agencies better coordinate with urban planners and utility companies to ensure infrastructure resilience during extreme weather events, especially considering how much we're seeing?
Yeah, and we know more and more of those events are interrelated. If you look at what's happened recently in Ruidoso, New Mexico, the previous fires were the cause of some of the most recent flooding. And so these impacts are inextricably related to one another. I think part of that starts with conversations, with recognitions of roles and responsibilities. And for example, if you're in the fire department, go buy your city planner lunch and let them know that that subdivision that they're designing could either be a respite from wildfire or an entrapment area, and their decisions are going to have long-term impacts. Let us help you make safer decisions and more beneficial decisions in your job and your efforts, and that extends to utilities. In Austin, we work very closely with the Austin Water Utility, who manages much of our wildland, to implement forest restoration and resiliency projects, but also to protect their infrastructure, because if their water substations go down, our fire hoses stop working. And the same with our Austin Energy Utility. We worked with them to buy a camera detection system to rapidly respond to wildfires. And it doesn't just cover their infrastructure, it covers the entire community. So there's a mutual benefit there, in addition to them working hard to manage the vegetation along their utilities, because if we lose fire, we lose water, and we lose access to that water in the fire service. And so all these issues are interrelated, and it just takes having those conversations with your peers and partners about their role in wildland fire safety and community resiliency to help them make that connection. And people are clever, and once they understand that they can have an impact, very few people don't want to improve public safety. And so helping one of your partners, make that connection can change the future of our built environments and our infrastructure, the way it's managed and how we respond to wildfires.
Nice. Do any of you have a lot of experience with other innovations that are happening in this space? Justice, you just talked about cameras. I know there's a lot of sensor networks that are starting to. What other innovations are happening in the CRR space that are perhaps might be interesting to people who aren't in it? Anyone have examples or?
You know, I don't know if I have examples necessarily that we're implementing, but I mean, I keep hearing different things. I know folks are looking at coating lines so that these power lines when they do break or get struck that they don't arc and they don't cause wildfires. And I've been seeing I think one thing um, that I've been thinking more and more about is how do we better utilize drones, because it seems like maybe those are where the next things are happening, whether it's for and they have multiple uses because you can use drones on a structure fire, you can use drones in a wildland fire just to be eyes in the sky kind of thing. But those things are becoming more and more capable of delivering water, delivering resources, delivering items, uh, informing people about what's happening, events, and how to respond. Those, you're able to have put cameras on those and map things out, and with AI technology, you're able to describe where the fire is and where it's going to be in the next 10 minutes, and where it's going to be in the next hour, the next day. And I think those are really cool innovations that are just going to continue to snowball into things that we'll be able to be using to just give firefighters on the ground more awareness. Like more information is better so that I can apply that information and not put myself in a situation that's dangerous or less dangerous.
Yeah. Anybody else have other innovative innovations that are stepping up into this space?
I
Sorry if
mean,
you don't.
I'll piggyback, Eric. For what you said, we do use drones here at CSFD. So we've actually been able to, on the west side, we had like earlier this year, last year, we had a few fires, lightning strikes. We were able to put our drones up pretty quick and get crews on that fire very quickly to get it out. We're using it for, if we have like a missing hiker or somebody who's lost, we'll throw our drones up and use that too. So that is kind of a big thing that we've pushed out the last year or so here. And then the other thing is we are working with Colorado Springs Utilities. They are looking at putting some like early detection systems out along their watersheds and things like that. So we're in the early stages of working with them on what does that look like for them? What does that look like for CSFD and things like that?
Tons of use for drones, I'm sure.
What about the use of any type of satellite for early detection? I've seen there's a couple different organizations that are deploying satellites for early stage insights, and again, it seems like it's the best vantage point possible to potentially see the fire where it is, where it isn't, where it could be going. But then, of course, then it's also what to do with those insights and how to make better decisions. But any thoughts on how satellite data is being used to help prepare, prevent, respond?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that work, and I feel like that's been the thing that, oh, hey, we'll be able to see these heat signatures from satellites and be able to let people know about those things. And I don't know. My personal opinion is that our cameras and our drones are working way better or faster, or maybe they're just because it's just more tangible and I can achieve that quickly. Or maybe I see satellites maybe in the future is really letting me know what's coming next. So when I'm looking at satellite data, I'm more looking at weather data, and I want to know what's happening next. Like, where's the next front coming from? Where are these outflows? And how do I better communicate from what the satellites are seeing back down to the ground? Because a lot of these big weather patterns are, they cover huge regions across multiple states. that are impacting my small little weather here in Santa Fe. And it's good to understand and know some of these when you have these major outflow winds from a storm that's 300 miles away.
I've got an opinion on this, but Justice or Ashley, you want to weigh in before I give my opinion?
I was just going to say along those lines, looking from more from a proactive than a response standpoint, utilizing things like satellites and drones and other technologies to assess wildland fire risk is a great enhancement of capacity. And there are assessment systems being built now that allow follow-up with homeowners on a regular basis. And that's a form of technology that leverages our capacity vastly. We can now detect the degree of defensible space around a particular structure, the structure separation distance between homes and other structures. And these are all factors that would have been done with boots on the ground in the past that we're able to rapidly assess a community's risk and make recommendations based on that technology. So I think it goes beyond just the response to wildfire, and it can be leveraged more and more for the mitigation and resiliency aspects of wildfire as well.
Nice. Ashley, anything else? Or is that good? Sort of.
No, I don't think I have much. Like I said, just working with CSU on some of their stuff. I don't know if it's going to be the satellite based or what that is. So I think, for me, it's just getting more information. But like Porf said, our drones are pretty good at what they do and detecting the hot spots, and we can see it right there on the screen. So I just think some of this technology stuff, yes, we're in 2025, but it's just going to continue, I think, to potentially grow, obviously, and get better for us. So,
Nice. Kevin, I think it's a good question. I said I was going to give my opinion. Um, so I think traditionally, satellites to me have been good for exactly what was just talked about. They give you good weather projections. They give you good fuel projections. You can look historically in what's happening with fuel loads and fuel conditions and base that into your models. If I am a good decision maker, and I'm not a practitioner anymore, so I can be free to give opinions. If I'm a good decision maker, I feel like the best decision comes from weighing all perspectives. And so I want sensors on the ground. I want boots on the ground. I want a drone that's flying, you know, just above fuels or just outside its, tether, as it were. I want low Earth orbit and I want satellite. And if I get all of those, I believe to the core my situational awareness is going to be better than it is now. And ultimately, that's going to help me make good decisions. I look forward to advances that are happening in satellite detection. I think one of the biggest missing pieces right now is return rates, how quickly a single satellite can get a view on your piece of Earth. And Earth Fire Alliance just recently launched their first sat. I know they have a plan for a bunch more. I'm really looking forward to we have a short return rate, and me as an incident commander get really quick information about what's happening that can be intertwined with my boots on the ground and my drone and the sensors that are giving me heat. Anyway, I think it's a huge positive advance. I will sort of transition here into if you're looking at what we've used satellites traditionally for or what people are experiencing. I promise you, statistics say it's getting hotter and it's getting drier. Whether this is a long-term change in the climate or whether it's some sort of rotation that's happening, I'm not going to get into, but we're experiencing it right now. And so a couple questions came in about the changes in the climate and wondering how is that influencing the risk landscape and perhaps how is it changing you're viewing what to do in the future? Do any of you have experience with that, anecdotes or otherwise? It's a goocher. It's a tough one.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that, Eric. And I think it goes back to the original question. The solution lies in complicated technology and science and translating it into simple solutions. So, for example, a lot of the research that groups like IBHS has done on and NIST has done on structure separation distances and 0 to 5. There's a lot of science behind that, but for a homeowner, it means simple, practical application of technology on the ground. And so, the 0 to 5 non-combustible zone is technological feat that we're simplifying for homeowner resilience. And it is through this mitigation that we'll be able to combat the increasing impacts of climate change and more severe weather. So wildfire mitigation is climate adaptation because we're being impacted by changing climate. We can all agree that when we started, there was such a thing as a fire season, and you can almost set your clock to it, and that's not a thing anymore. We have year-round potential in almost any area in the country. It's no longer considered a Western issue. States across the nation are being impacted more and more by wildfires in areas that historically haven't been considered fire prone areas. So I think the wildland fire community was one of the early adapters to recognizing that something's changing in our environment and it's creating worse outcomes. And that's where we can leverage that science and technology, safer building practices to ensure that we're resilient to climate impacts, whatever the cause and origin of them are. So we've been implementing climate adaptation and severe weather vulnerability solutions for a long time in the wildland fire community. It just hasn't always been recognized that wildfire mitigation is climate adaptation.
Or if Ashley, was that just too good to build on?
That was great, Justice.
The thing I thought of was living with fire. Like that's the thing that I've been hearing since I started was we want to create communities that can live with fire. And I think that's what we're doing. And that's those principles don't change on how to prevent or how to protect our homes and our properties. Those principles that I learned 20 years ago are still being applied now. It's just now we have extreme events that are impacting these areas at a level that we haven't seen. But the homes are still burning the same way that they were burning, geez, before I even started. They're still starting from the embers. And if you can stop the flames from getting right to them, those are the two things that you need to do is think about where the embers are going to land right around in that first 5 foot zone. And how do you prevent the flames from actually getting to the house? And that's the first 30 feet.
Pretty solid. So are any of your organizations, I mean, maybe Justice aside since he's now with ICU, but are you all building future climate projections into your future plans? Or is the answer sort of more of what you're doing now?
I would say for us right now, it's more of what we're doing right now. But I think this is a good conversation to look at that and see, how can we take that climate change and how can we potentially project out into, updating, some of our stuff and what we're doing. Because like we're talking about, we're going to have to, because it's not going to stop here.
What I'd piggyback on, what I'm learning is that yeah, maybe we're adding some of this stuff for climate or for what the future is, but it's shaping it in a way that is resilient to um to leadership because we're the city of Santa Fe, we're going to get a new mayor here in the next 6 months, and I don't know what his views are compared to the current mayor's views are on community risk reduction. I'm sure there's some alignment there, but when you have these transitions in leadership, people change. They have their own ideas on views on what's important to them, and it's building resilient planning documents that can survive these different shifts so that you get what you want achieved. And I think it's figuring out how to strike that balance between things so that you can continue to work towards those end goals. And ultimately, it's at least for me, ultimately, it's serving the residents, serving the people.
Yeah. So we've been talking a lot sort of externally focused. Santa Fe Fire Department, Colorado Springs Fire Department, Austin Fire Department, all three of you were based out of fire departments. What are the challenges with CRR being housed within fire departments as part of what the fire department is doing? What challenges and how do you get past those challenges? How have you three been successful working within a fire department?
Yeah, and the good work in Austin continues, but the way that we approach this, and Ashley mentioned it, is we made community risk reduction operational. And so one of the things that we required, in addition to all firefighters taking wildland firefighting training, is that they take CEs on structure risk assessment. But we didn't do it in the context of you're going to go talk to Mr. or Mrs. Smith about this. You're going to use this skill set to understand how to triage and prepare structures for wildfire defense. And oh, by the way, you might get a call at your station to go do this before a fire occurs. And if you do it before the fire occurs, you're treating that as an opportunity to get the homeowner to triage and mitigate their structure, so you have a better operational outcome. So being that fire departments are operational organizations, I think you have to translate CRR into operational outcomes to get broader buy-in and support. And that means integrating it into your training program, integrating it into your prevention programs, of course, your wildland programs if you have them, but also extending that out to other departments and organizations so you have a multiplier effect and really making CRR everybody's job.
Yeah, and that's it's the same thing that we do here at, Colorado Springs Fire Department is, we have wildfire mitigation as civilians, and then we have our wildland program, which is based out of, a few of our stations for all of our sworn people. And so we are bridging that gap. We are working together and doing training with our civilian and our sworn staff, right? Because we may not look at, structured triaging like our sworn people do. And so we can take things, they can learn from us and we can learn from them.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I think integrating them as best as possible. But like we've been talking this whole hour, it's those relationships and figuring out and how do you build relationships? You have shared experiences and building those shared experiences, and that means mixing people up. Your wildland folks, your prevention folks, your I don't know. We have mobile integrated health here. We have all these different programs, and you need to mix people up together so that they understand each other. They don't necessarily have to like each other, but you want them to at least understand where we're all coming from.
So is it a good summary to say you as mitigation CR experts, you're having to balance the needs of everyone in the community and everyone within your department? And easy, check. That's how you find success. I get it. All right. So a minute each to close out. All right. So what is the future of wildland risk in our communities and what's going to change the trends that we've been talking about? So what's the future of risk and what's going to change it into the future? Justice, you want to start?
Certainly, the future of wildfire risk, if we don't deviate from our current path, is going to be continued destruction and of entire communities like we're seeing now. The solution to that is through developing more resilient buildings and structures, creating defensible space around those structures, building relationships in communities that are sustainable, having plans that support those long-term ongoing efforts like Porfirio mentioned, so they last beyond an individual and get carried forward by a collective, and embracing the fact that we aren't powerless against wildfire, that there are solutions that we can implement, and it takes an entire community to prepare for wildfire.
Well, that's going to be easy to follow up. Ashley?
Yeah, so a few of my notes here too, kind of what Justice said, us for here in the Springs too is right. We continue to build in our, WUI areas. Luckily, we do have our codes in place here for Colorado Springs that we're updating, but we have to continue to push our message. We have to continue to educate, or we are going to have that catastrophic fire again, and potentially more homes will be lost, potentially more lives will be lost. So, I think like for us, the biggest thing, especially with this state WUI code stuff coming down, is we're going to be able to take that And, some of it's not going to be retroactive for us, but at least we'll be able to start getting some of these homes that were built earlier than our codes and trying to get them up to, this day and age and have, good structure hardening, vegetation management, and things like that. So not only is that going to help the community, but again, right, that's going to turn around and help the firefighters in the event that we do have a wildfire. So,
Nice. Orf, closing it out.
Yeah. So the one was risk, and what was the other thing?
What are you going to do to change that into the future?
So I think the future of risk is something that seems to be increasing, and we're seeing that. We had Paradise, and then we had Lahaina, and then we have LA, and we have all these examples constantly increasing their severities. And even our own local communities, we can probably point to examples of ever increasing uh, events that are historical, never been seen before. This has never happened, and it seems like we have those every year. And that, though, having those and knowing that they're there, taking, using those, because that's when I get the most engagement. When the LA fires were going on, we had 3 weeks of nonstop news coverage. That was when I had the most calls of, hey, I need you to come to my property right now and let me know what I need to do. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Where when you have lulls in those gaps, that's when it's hard, when trying to get convincing people to do things. The other thing that's driving action is insurance. Insurance companies are becoming more of an active player. It's hard to engage with them. They're so diverse and there's so many companies out there, and it even comes down to what an individual agent is willing to insure or not insure, what their views are. And that is really driving a lot of the engagement that I've been seeing lately. And so I think those two forces are really pushing where risk is going. And I think knowing that and understanding that and doing all the things we talked about, the technology, the information, building relationships, using all that information to get work done on the ground, because we know it works. IBHS, Jack Cohen's been screaming from the top of his lungs, seems like for 50 years, about, hey, all you have to do is this defensible space mitigation and we'll save homes. And we keep learning that lesson over and over again. And it's the same thing I've been preaching. It
Yep,
works. Let's just get it done.
it works. Orf, Ashley, Justice, y'all are heroes. I know you're my heroes. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing a ton of awesome information. Kevin, why don't you close us out, man?
Catch us live in 2 weeks at FRI. I'm working with Eric to cook up a few different Wildfire Wednesdays, Heroes and Beyond the Flames, kind of our podcast branding sessions throughout the Wednesdays. So we'll be broadcast live from FRI as well as doing some podcasts there. But I just enjoy being a fly in the wall here. So many lessons learning. Just as I think my favorite quotes, and you all kind of said the word relationships and needing to add another R to the CRR. I think we need to make like I don't know, an AI image of a CRRR, and really lean into that because it's really the people that get behind it. And if you don't have people buying in, then it's just not going to go anywhere. And we're just sitting here fighting this unfightable fight. So I want to thank you all for the leadership and work that you do. Excited to continue to learn more. And seems like we'll have to do another one again soon. And appreciate you and appreciate everyone leaving comments. There was a bunch today, so it's really encouraging to see that. So tune in again. We got Tech Talk Tuesdays, first and third Thursday of every month. Excuse me, first and third Tuesdays of every month, and Wildfire Wednesdays, second and fourth Wednesdays. So tune in.